This week's episode, Turunesh, a vocalist with Tanzanian roots, and Gurtej, a vocalist and producer with Indian heritage, share each other's journeys.
Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Alrighty. How you doing today?
I'm doing good, how are you?
Good, I'm doing really good. What's your name and where are you from?
Turunesh, I'm from Tanzania. How about you?
Tanzania.
Yeah.
Originally I'm from, I was born in Delhi. I grew up in Long Island, but now I'm here in Surrey, expanding my musical journey.
Yeah, that's amazing. Do you like it in Surrey?
I love it here. I'm very much inspired by nature. I love seeing the mountains here every time I drive out, seeing those mountains. Yeah. And it's been an absolute just pleasure, an absolute journey to just be surrounded by so much nature.
Yeah, BC is gorgeous.
Yeah.
Okay, so just so we can get to know each other a little bit more, how do you say like hello my friend or hello like my neighbor in your language?
So the way you would say that in Punjabi is "Kidan pehne," which means it's like a slang version of saying like "How's it going, sister?"
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful.
Do
Hello. Can you say it again for me?
It's "Kidan pehne."
Well, I don't think I might be able to do that.
Try it
again.
So "Kidan pehne."
Pehne.
Yeah. Get a little more
like
intonation on the
R?
end. "Kidan." Try it. "Kidan pehne."
Pehne.
There you go.
Okay,
you got it.
Got it.
That's what's up.
Kidan pehne.
Kidan pehne.
Kidan pehne.
Yeah.
Okay, I feel like I'm not rolling my tongue enough.
Kidan
Kidan pehne. Okay, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to try to say that next time I meet somebody. And that's hello, my sister.
Yeah, that's like a slang version
I'll
of saying,
reserve
like,
it for the
what's up,
ladies.
sister? Yeah.
Okay, that's
there
beautiful.
You go.
Okay.
Now, how would you say like hello neighbor or like hello friend in your language?
Yeah, so Gurtej is not like too gendered. So like what I'm about to tell you is like kind of like you can say it to anybody. It's habari, which is like a way of saying like hello. Then you can add ndugu at the end, and ndugu is kind of like, because technically means relative, like a family member, but it's like really respectable and like polite and sort of endearing to be able to say to anybody, you know. And it's like just sort of show like a oneness and unity like in the culture and the community. So it'd be habari ndugu.
How is it?
Habari ndugu.
Dugu.
Ndugu. Habari ndugu.
Habari ndugu.
Yeah.
Is that close?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, that's really good. Well done.
Right. Thank you.
Good. That sounds good. Yeah.
Likewise.
Nice. So I'm curious, where exactly in India are you from?
I am from Punjab, which means land of five rivers, and it's a beautiful, beautiful area. A lot of rich natural resources, and it's the music. I think is also influenced very much by the nature, and so there's a lot of very much folky kind of sounds coming out of Punjab, and that's kind of like what I'm doing a little bit with the Western music, bringing in kind of Western folk, a little bit of North Indian folk.
That's cool.
You know, and kind of bringing that together. But what about you? Tell me a little bit about your background, where you come from.
I have a little bit of mixed heritage. I'm half Tanzanian and half Ethiopian, so like both countries are like in Eastern Africa. My mom is first generation Kenyan, so she's Ethiopian but like born and raised in Kenya. Yeah. So I definitely feel like I have roots in both like Tanzania, Kenya, and Ethiopia. So again, like all in East Africa. And like I speak Kiswahili, which is like the lingua franca of East Africa, originating like from Tanzania and like the Swahili coast. And yeah, it's a beautiful language. The music is very like melodious, and there's like like a lot of Arabic influence in Kiswahili. Like definitely, like if you speak Kiswahili, you can't understand what an Arab is saying, and vice versa. The languages aren't interchangeable, but like there's a lot of like root words that we share. There's a bit of like Hindi and actually like Punjabi influence in Kiswahili as well, some Portuguese. It's like a very mixed language, but it's mostly Bantu, and there's a lot of like Quranic, or I'd say like Islamic influences in how Swahili is spoken as well. Yeah. And so I just think it's like a very melodious, beautiful language, and I try and sort of like bring those intonations into my music.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
So not to go like too deep into like a history lesson, but during the late 1700s, the people in North India, the Sikhs, faced severe religious persecution, and defending not only ourselves but others who weren't able to defend themselves really became a core part of our identity. And so at the time, the gurus, our teachers, in a sense, basically created, call it a code of conduct, or basically they created a lifestyle for Sikhs to adhere to. So that's why we adopted the turban and the beard. It became a part of who we were, and there's spiritual significance to that, and also what I find even cooler is like kind of like a rebellious kind of aspect to it as well. Emperors at the time were saying that the turban was designated for only people of high nobility, and so the guru said that no, man, like anybody can carry themselves like kings and queens, and we can all wear the turbans, right? And yeah, with the beard, it separates us from the rest of the crowd, and it just makes us stand out. It's like it's a cool way of saying we are Sikhs. This is who we are, and we're not afraid to show it. And I think that's really beautiful.
That's powerful.
And growing up in Long Island, for that very reason, I felt almost disconnected with my own community, is because I didn't see anybody doing Western music. I didn't see any people that looked like me listening to the Beatles or listening to Fleetwood Mac and stuff like that. And so I really hope to kind of bring those Western aspects and those like old Western sounds into Punjabi music, and introduce that aspect of music into my own world, and show like this is also what's possible, and just show people what's possible. Adventure, have fun. I think that's what it's all about.
And I think it's really important to like acknowledge like because like as much as you are like so proudly Sikh and Punjabi, like you also like had these experiences like growing up in Long Island and all this music that you've absorbed, and it's like it's a part of who you are as a person, and like the only way that your music can sort of be itself is if that they all come together. So I think it's beautiful that you're forging a whole new sound that takes into consideration like the intersectionality of the way that you grew up.
Thank you. What genres of music do you make?
I definitely identify as an alternative artist. Genre-wise, I would say neo-soul, R&B, blues, jazz, as well as world. I guess from when I like pull from my traditional music, like vocally, lyrically, and like I guess like instrumentation-wise as well. How about you? What kind of music do you make?
Yeah, I make a lot of R&B, neo-soul, jazz, lo-fi, and mainly a lot of just singer-songwriter acoustic style sounds. In recent times I've been messing around with a lot of just acoustic sounds. So that's kind of where we're at.
So what are some aspects of your culture and like where you grew up that you sort of like bring into your music naturally?
So where I come from in India, there's so many different instruments. There's instruments like the sitar, dilruba, tabla, which is like a percussive instrument, and they all are these like very beautiful instruments, and they help promote or get out a different sound. And I made a song that has a violinist that plays Indian classical kind of like riffs in the song. And with my music, I'm just looking to bring in those sounds into my music, those Indian classical kind of frameworks of creating music into this kind of Western, more rigid style. Because Indian music is it's kind of like R&B in the sense that it doesn't have a fixed format, right? It has certain rules, but it's always it's open to the creator at where they want to take it. And so there's some very beautiful little Indian classical aspects that I'm looking to bring into my music.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. Do you ever do it like vocally? Because I know there's like really beautiful like Indian riffs as well in music. And do you bring that in like when you're recording?
That's something that I've been trying to. I wouldn't say I'm like the best Indian classical singer.
Vocally it seems like it's like a lot of training that must go into
it's like it's totally different muscle memory because the Western singing, you're growing up with it. It's very do re mi fa sol la ti do, and then with Indian classical, it's like everything. It's that, but like everything in between that as well. And I'm sure it's like that with a lot of other world music where you know, I feel like Western music is very like rigid, where other like you know, music from other parts of the world, from India and stuff, like we delve into the in betweens, you know, and kind of bringing those two together. I think is a very beautiful thing.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing your music because like that sounds like an interesting mesh that like isn't so common today. Yeah, so I think that's gonna be beautiful to hear.
What about you? Yeah, is there any sounds from your background that you're looking to bring into your music, or you already have?
Yeah, for me, it's sort of more like a cultural essence that I like to bring in, because sometimes I'll sing in Kiswahili, which is like my national language, or like the lingua franca of East Africa, but I might like sing in Swahili but make like a very R&B song, or I might sing in Kiswahili and write something that's still very bluesy. So for me, and of course I have also made songs that are like very traditional in terms of like the drums and the percussion and all that kind of stuff, but what I really like to carry over in terms of like how I like to represent or pull my culture into my music is sort of showcase the sensuality and the femininity that Kiswahili sort of carries. I sometimes feel as though, you know, like Kiswahili cultures, as well as like many African cultures, I'm sure your culture as well, is very conservative, you know, and women are often quite silent when it comes to certain things. And so I tend to sort of just try and go against that grain. So I sort of like intentionally pull Kiswahili into songs and try and sing about things that are taboo, you know, but are also like very natural and intrinsic, and things that like women talk about like behind closed doors and amongst one another. So I sort of just try to carry in that like Swahili essence and femininity and sensuality, and I try to bring that culture into the music. And
that's really
that's sort of how I like to do it.
You know, I find in Indian culture, generally speaking, it's very, like, there's like kind of like jokingly, there's three categories that you kind of go into. You either become a doctor, lawyer, or an engineer. And those are very, you know, respectable, noble careers to pursue. But I think just the act of any South Asian artist going into maybe, not even music, but, you know, doing art or singing and stuff, I think that is just like an act of rebellion that I find like really cool, and that kind of keeps me in the music, you know? Because I don't see a lot of people from the South Asian community doing Western music, and so I'm just looking to bring that out a little bit more and showcase us in a different stage where we're not just your lawyers and doctors, but we're also creatives, we're singers, we're dancers, we're artists.
We're poets.
We're 100%.
100%. I think it's so crazy that like these are careers that are, like music is a career that isn't like very respected like in our cultures, because like historically, like musicians, poets had like such like a big role to play in society, you know? Like they were the storytellers, they were the people that like held history, like they had really just like significant like roles to play in society and kingdoms. Like musicians meant something like for spiritual practices and this and that. And it's just so crazy that like in our cultures where music is so intrinsic to us, and like how we communicate with one another, how we dance, I feel like we both come from cultures that are very musical. You know, it's a big part of our cultures and how we identify. Like music is a big part of that, but then it's also like looked down upon and like seen as, and I think it's just because of like the world that we live in now, where like money and currency and capitalism is everything, and it's just kind of seen as a career that yes, it's beautiful, we love it, we enjoy it, but it's the path of most resistance, and like nobody wants their child to pick something that's going to make their life hard, you know. So sometimes I think we feel like our parents don't understand, or like we're rebelling, but I think it really it just comes from concern. They feel like you're making your life hard for yourself, but I think you're finding your way back to yourself. I think that's always going to be a difficult journey.
And I think a lot of that comes from just kind of that immigrant mentality. My parents immigrated to the United States, and where I grew up in Long Island, and I think for them it was more so about survival. Putting food on the table, making sure that I had, you know, enough, you know, to get by. And for them, it was more survival. But, you know, thankfully, I've been given that opportunity to now, you know, create, and, you know, because they sacrificed so much for us to be here. And I think a lot of that just comes from, you know, that immigrant mindset of just hustle, hustle, hustle. But now here I am, you know, like out, and, you know, it's different, you know, it's just, it's not, I've been blessed with an opportunity. I think we've been blessed with an opportunity to go and explore different avenues and different paths. And I think that's a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, I think so too. 100%,
why do you think it's important for artists to collaborate coming from such different backgrounds?
Yeah. I think it's important, and this is gonna sound like a super like cheesy and a corny response, but to learn, you know? I think like it can be damaging for yourself as a creative, as an artist, to like, only work like in a vacuum of your own thoughts and your own consciousness, because like you're not challenged, you know. I also think it's this discovery. I mean, like what you were talking about before, about how like like in Western music it's do re mi fa sol la ti do, but like in Indian music there's so many different in betweens, and like maybe like a whole different sort of progression that like is completely like unknown to other cultures. And I think it's important to maybe not necessarily like learn it so you can do it for yourself, because I feel that can also sometimes be problematic. There's a lot of power in simply appreciating what other cultures have to offer. And like when you collaborate, everyone is sort of like, you know, putting forth and championing like their culture and their sound, but like sharing a space, you know, sharing a beat. So that's why I really love world music, because you kind of delve into that, and like you hear like musicians from Mali collaborating with like a Katama band from Spain, and like you have like flamenco music and Malian music just beautifully meshing together. And like the Malian artist is singing in like the Malian language and the Malian instrument, and like the Spanish musicians are like, you know, like playing their guitars and their bass, and like everyone's doing their own thing, but they come together so beautifully, you know. And I think it just kind of shows the interconnectedness, and that like we are very different. And I don't think that there's a necessity to like constantly try and put forth this idea of like we are all one, we are all the same, because what's wrong with the fact that we're different? Like, why can't that be perfectly okay? You know, and I think like when two different artists from two different worlds come together, you kind of like, it's that power of difference coexisting and adapting and like melting into one another.
Almost like a yin and yang, where like you have to have a little bit of both to have the entire piece together.
Exactly. I think it's about like making space for one another, you know, and sharing.
And celebrating our differences. I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. But what about you? Why do you think it's important for people of like different cultures to come together and make music?
Well, one thing that I've found really fascinating is that regardless, well, you know, I think music is just a universal language.
Of course.
In the sense that, you know, necessarily I don't need to understand your language, you don't need to understand my language, but if I can pick up a tabla and pull up a beat, you can still groove to that, you can still vibe out to it, you know what I mean? Or I can play a melody on a harmonium or a sitar, and you can come in with, you know, an instrument from your part of the world, and it doesn't have, and there's no barrier to that. You know, we can still create and still, you know, develop something that's beautiful and celebrate that. And I think that's important. And like you said, it's important for artists to get together, and because it's damaging to yourself, you know, because as artists you want to be able to explore, you want to be able to highlight our differences and celebrate that.
100%. Like I think it's a shame to not allow yourself, you know.
It's like you're limiting yourself. Do you find that, you know, when you travel, do you find that maybe when you're back home and maybe you're creating music, do you find that you get a different sound? Do you feel like you're inspired by like different things, and maybe your environment influences your sound? Yeah,
100%. I mean, anywhere where like the air is different, the music is gonna sound different. So I feel like when I'm back home, I'm surrounded by different influences, and it'll bleed into the music. And when I'm here, same thing, you know, because like when I make music, I'm a very visual person. So I feel as though like the visuals are sort of drive that I create in Vancouver versus when I'm in Tanzania are sort of worlds apart, but I'm the same person still. So I still feel like rooted in my music wherever I am, but definitely like the aesthetics, the sound, it's different. How about you?
I do very much feel influenced by nature. I feel like I'm very much at home when I'm here in Surrey and in Vancouver. But when I travel to New York, when I'm out, maybe when I go to India, and I, you know, being surrounded by different people and cultures definitely seeps its way into the music, even maybe without even me knowing it. And what I guess, I'm sure you've traveled a whole bunch throughout your musical journey. Is there a particular place or maybe a time that you just felt really at home and felt like, you know, something special was happening there? Well, what do you prefer? Are you like nature? Or are you like city?
I'm definitely a city girl.
A city girl?
I grew up in the city, but like on the coast, you know? So it was like, it wasn't like a crazy metropolitan. It was like really calm, you know, lots of sun, lots of beach, lots of islands. So like, that's the kind of city life that I like, something that isn't too fast-paced, but there's still a little bit of vibrancy and chaos. Music isn't like simply just a passion or something. It's like, it's a vocation for me. Something that I feel like I'm called to and that I need to dedicate my life to. I feel as though when it comes to like anything in your career, there's like a point where you realize like what is and what isn't. And I don't know, have you ever had an experience where like it just clicked that you don't have any other choice but to be a musician?
Yeah, I feel like being a musician is such a crazy path to follow. Yeah. And I agree with you, like you can't, I don't believe that it's like something you kind of like have to, like if you really want to do it, music I think is a lifestyle. You have to be open to new experiences, open to, I have this motto, and it's seek discomfort, right? Yeah. It's just if maybe you might not have the answers immediately, but you throw yourself into the deep end, and it might be a success, it might not, but that's the adventure part of it. You know, you never know what could happen. Right out of high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do, and just at that very time, I was reached out to by a U.S. Army recruiting officer. Yeah. And me being me, and just, you know, I just love adventure, and also kind of like romanticizing like war movies and stuff like that. Yeah. I was like, man, how awesome would it be to be, you know, in the Army? Because in Long Island, in New York, it's like it's very, it's like respectable. It's very like noble for people to go into the Army. It's like a thing. Yeah. And then I was tested, did all these interviews and everything, and I was just hell bent. I was like, I knew this is what I wanted to do. I'd made up my mind. Yeah. And then I was also making little Instagram like clips, like 1-minute clips on Instagram, and somebody saw them from Toronto, and they were getting married, and they asked me to come out and perform for their reception. And in my mind, I was like,
that's incredible.
Yeah, thank you. And I was like somebody wants to fly me out and you know, perform for their reception. Yeah. I was like, you know what? And I was like super scared, super nervous. I'd never done anything like that before, and I was like, you know what? Seek discomfort, you know, let's just dive into the deep end. I might not have the answers, but you know, we're gonna learn. This is gonna be the journey. Yeah. And so I did my set, everything was great, I met everybody, and as soon as I was done my set and I put the guitar down, I was like, man, and you know, everyone's like clapping and all that stuff, like, man, like I don't know what it is about it, but it just feels right. It's like it just, this, you know, this is what I feel like I was meant to do, and I was like, now, you know, I'm gonna do whatever I can, align myself with the right people, and just and dive right into this. And that's kind of that moment for me where I was like, you know, it feels right, and so I'm gonna pursue it. Yeah. And now here we are in Surrey, creating new sounds. That's
so interesting, because like, no, a wedding is just like beautiful romantic moment where like they're like sort of choosing each other. Yeah. That's where sort of like music sort of chose you when you fell in love with it. It's like a cool parallel there. But yeah, it's like a very romantic story. I like it.
Home at last, there's no place that I'd rather be. Safe and sound, feel like nothing can get to me. Run away, I've come so far, just gazing at these shooting stars. Sun is flying high today.
So I grew up listening to like a lot of Damien Rice, and like he was super, super foundational to like me, like learning how to sort of evolve like from as a poet into a songwriter. Yeah. And I love the way that he is with his words. And so yeah, he really inspired me, and it was just like with a couple of chords and sort of like learning from him that I started writing my own songs. So the guitar like played a role like in my formation as an artist, and I still have it. I like it there in my room, you know. I like when it looks at me, but I don't play. I would say definitely back in the day when I was like learning how to songwrite, definitely was like first with the guitar. Yeah. But when I kind of realized that like the guitar really isn't my instrument, and I'm more of just like full-on 100% vocalist. Yeah. I've mostly been inspired by music. So listening to like artists that I love, sometimes it's like lo-fi beats. I can sort of like find melodies of my own on other people's productions, and I sort of go into the studio and I will like sing to my producer this song that like is inspired by like an Erykah Badu track or a Lauryn Hill track, or et cetera, et cetera. And at a certain point, we like kind of like put the reference aside, and like I just start singing the song as it is, and like I sing my melodies, my lyrics, and it sounds totally different from the reference. Right. And we start sort of like building a beat around the melody that I have. And sometimes, like if I'm lucky, the lyrics will come to me with a melody. So like maybe like I'm in the shower, or like oddly enough, a lot of the time when I'm in transit. I feel like I write a lot when I'm on the train or on the bus. And that's where I can do like a lot of like mental inventory. And I feel like a lot of songs come to me then. And yeah, sometimes it's with a melody. So I'll just sort of go to my producer and I'll sing, and they'll sort of like, fill in the gaps. I really like working with the producer because like we really meet each other halfway.
For sure, yeah. So recently I've started producing some of my own tracks. Just, I can come up with like little ideas here and there, and then go into like a little studio and we'll cook it up in there. But just to start a vibe, I'd love to kind of, bring two worlds together and create something with you.
Please.
Alrighty, let's do it up.
Comfortable, let's do that.
Okay.
Tune into the next episode when Turunesh and Gurtej make a song about the feeling of Sunday morning.
I came home, long time away. Something in the air so faint that I can feel a change. Been so long, I see it in your face. But if the time is right, I hope that we can find a way. I'm feeling like a runaway, driving, missing exits in the pouring rain. And now we're pointing fingers, talking who's to blame. And we have to say goodbye, I gotta catch this plane. It's time to fly away. Why don't fly away?